Okay, I'm going to go in on it, and I am supremely and constantly conscious of the unleavened diet of grim tidings. I guess that's partly the appeal of boosterism and cakeism, or whatever you want to call it this week. Comforting lies. He got all the big calls right. Brexit's going brilliantly. Tom had a guest on this morning. I think it was a guest. It may have been a caller. Tom Swarbrick standing in for Nick Ferrari on The Breakfast Show. And it was one of the oddest things I've ever heard. It was like a sort of gurgitation of complete gibberish about free ports and trade deals. And just an inability to count, really, in the context of trade lost or trade diminished by the imposition of economic sanctions versus, I think, the only trade deal that you could reasonably argue was slightly better than the one we already had was the one that was negotiated with Japan, but they're now doing less trade with us. Because even though the terms of the deal may have been marginally improved, the fact that Japanese companies trading with the United Kingdom can no longer use us as a portal into the single market means that they're actually now doing less trade than they were before. So everything's got worse, and yet this boosterism, this cakeism continues. So I am going to have a crack at the gulf now between and it may be that we end up talking about family members. So I think it's fair to say, and let me stress that I would like to be wrong. All the time I would like to be wrong. There is no doubt in my mind that I would like to be wrong. But listen, I'm going to do this relatively randomly. I cut this stuff out of the newspaper every day, but glancing over as well at stories we're probably not going to cover. Universities are enrolling 40% more overseas students than 5 years ago as they favour applicants from China and India. Anger over water bosses' second jobs. We've done that. This has just dropped from Citigroup, the investment bank. Inflation will almost double to 18.6% in the coming months as energy prices continue to soar. It's a prediction, it's a forecast, but it's from a very reputable source. It also posits the possibility that the average household energy bill could hit £4,567 in January of next year and just shy of 6,000 by April. Okay, so that's there. You've got, as you know, the raw sewage being dumped into our seas on an unprecedented level. You've got a crisis in care home staffing, leaving residents with basic needs unmet. You've got bin lorry drivers in Scotland now taking children to school because of the shortage of staff. You've got ambulance waits reaching, unconscionable levels. Nothing to do with the people driving the ambulances or the medical professionals in our NHS. Cost of living debt crisis. More than 1.7 million households are considering or have already cancelled direct debits to energy suppliers this autumn. And some people can't hear the alarm bells. So there are three ways into the next part of this conversation, okay? The first is why it's right to ignore the alarm bells. I don't think anyone can deny that the alarm bells are ringing, can they? Now, just with that little random run-through of headlines, from care homes to bin lorries to sewage to inflation to the cost of living to energy bills. Right, alarm bells are ringing. There you go, you can hear them. Yes, they do alarm bells here quite often. Every I don't know, maybe it's commercially sensitive information, but the flipping heck, most annoying drills you could ever imagine. So anyway, the alarm bells are ringing. They're ringing at a very, very high level. Ready? Why are some people ignoring them? 03456060973. Now, the answer I want, but this is more in hope than expectation, is that there's nothing to worry about, James. 18% inflation, there's never going to happen, and I'll tell you why. What I don't do on this programme, and I appreciate it upsets some people, is I don't treat your opinion as equal to, for example, a really clever person. I just don't, you know. The idea that you can just decide whatever you want to decide by consulting Facebook and then commit to that belief as if it were a sort of cultish devotion is just crackers, and it's a large part of the problems that we've got at the moment. So the alarm bells are ringing. They are ringing at a volume I don't remember hearing before in my life. If you're not familiar with my own background, I'm 50 years old. I know I sound and look a lot younger, but I kid you not, I am 50 years old. It's 50. And that means I was born in 1972. That's not an opinion, it's counting. And I don't remember this happening. I was perhaps too young. I remember when houses were being repossessed a lot because interest rates went up so much. But I don't remember that being coupled with other cost of living crises or with sewage issues or huge shortages of workers, whatever it may be. And then, every time I glance at my inbox, there's stuff that we don't read about, really. All the pork that we're sending to Portugal to be butchered because we don't have the abattoirs here. And all the workers, all the vets have left. I mean, everywhere you look. So you might still not be ready to hear the truth about Brexit. So we'll keep Brexit on the simmer, shall we? We'll keep it simmering. Let's even pretend, if it helps, that Brexit isn't a large driver of all of these issues, okay? All we are going to agree on at this point in proceedings is that the alarm bells are ringing. And now we move into the things you can disagree with. It seems to me that the bigger the emergency, the more responsibility would be placed at the feet of the people who are in charge. Or the people who have been in charge for, say, 12 years, or go back further if you want. But in the context of British party politics, you can only go back 12 years. The same people have been in charge for 12 years. The same party has been in government for 12 years, in coalition for a while, and then not. And those alarm bells are ringing louder than I have ever heard. And I don't understand why so many people are ignoring them. And that is my question for you. If you are one of the people unspooked by the alarm bells, then you are absolutely welcome to explain to the rest of us why we should all chill out a bit. I think it's going to be hard to do in the context of cost of living, just in the context of cold, hard numbers being put in front of people. You might well be able to say that you're fine, but that would make you very unpatriotic, wouldn't it? Almost the definition of unpatriotic would be, I'm all right, Jack, everyone else can go whistle. Patriotic involves the national interest. And I don't think it's looking good. So how even can people ignore the alarm bells? And I'd love to speak to you about people you know who do this. There's probably going to be a generational divide here. But how can anybody now be doing it? I'll tell you something interesting. First time for everything. I went to a Chelsea game a couple of weeks ago. I went to the Chelsea Spurs game, and I was being looked after by a friend of mine, and we were in what I think would once have been called the prawn sandwich section of Stamford Bridge. And it's high-end hospitality. I think the season tickets at that level are about $8,000 a pop. So you're not really dealing with people who haven't got a bit of spare cash, a bit of money to spend. And it was Chelsea Football Club. Our lunch was interrupted, delightfully. Our lunch was interrupted on several occasions by people coming over to me. And listen, I'm not going to blow smoke up my own backside, simply to talk to me about the size and the sound of the alarm bells. People coming up to me, kind enough to say something nice about the programme, and then to say, God, listen to those alarm bells. I'm really worried about metaphorically speaking, whether they were talking about energy bills or the cost of living or inflation or whatever it may be, the difficulties of importing, actually, one of them. And that's at Chelsea Football Club in the posh seats, right? That's not me at a Guardian Readers Weekend Festival or at one of the book events I do with largely like-minded people. That's Chelsea Football Club, $8,000 debentures. People queuing up to say hello, not quite queuing up, figure of speech, coming over to say hello, thank me for the show, tell me how much they enjoy listening, and to express their deep concerns about the direction of traffic and the volume of the alarms that are ringing in all of our ears. And I then turn to not just newspapers, but also the, if you like, the sense of, or the national discourse. And I do not see, let's just say politics. I then turn to politics. And I simply don't see it. I get it from some Labour MPs. I think Rayner and Burnham, and increasingly, but belatedly, Starmer, they seem to be articulating the sense of urgency. But I see nobody on the Conservative benches who can even hear these alarm bells. And I find it terrifying. I can't watch these hustings. Seriously, it's like putting pins in my eyes. But I catch up on a few of the clips, and it's just a sort of assembly of gammony individuals cheering gibberish and calling for more of the same. How can they not hear the alarm bells? Is it because by acknowledging the existence of the alarm bells, they would have to, at some level, attribute responsibility to the people that they're still enthralled to? And then you read in your newspaper today that a significant proportion of Conservative voters wish that Boris Johnson hadn't been handed his sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap. And you just sort of think, what do you need to hear to realise that things are worrying? Worrying. That's all. So, talk me through one of three things. The first hand, most welcome, but I've got to be honest, I'm going to take a lot of persuading, is that there's nothing to worry about, and they're not really alarm bells at all. They're just poorly tuned ice cream van jingles. 0345 6060 973. Number two. Why do people you know, and you know them better than I do, how do they sustain the notion that there are no alarm bells ringing? 0345 6060 973. And finally, and I'll take anything you've got on this, obvious answers will include Brexit and media, but I want other answers, more imaginative answers, even quite funny answers would be welcome on a day like today. How can the party of government be absolutely deaf to the alarm bells that the rest of us can hear? That's probably the scariest and therefore the most important element of this inquiry. How can the party of government apparently be deaf to the alarm bells that the rest of us can hear? And we can hear them in care homes, and we can hear them in hospitals, and we can hear them in schools. We've gone from Boris Johnson's promise of 40 new hospitals to learning last week that there are 34 hospitals in this country with roofs that could cave in at any moment. You believe the lie about the 40 hospitals, despite all the people queuing up to tell you it was a lie? How can you still be loyal to that project, to that man, to that party? So question number three. That's the most interesting one of all. How can the party of government be deaf to the alarm bells that we can hear ringing in care homes, in hospitals, in ambulances, although it's easy to get them mixed up with the actual sirens, in schools, in sewage plants, at the seaside, on beaches, in the envelopes containing our energy bills, in our supermarket receipts? We can hear the alarm bells ringing everywhere, with Citibank warning today that inflation could hit 18%, 18.6%. The alarm bells are ringing everywhere, and they are ringing louder than I have ever heard. And I'm 50. I know, it's hard to believe. It's because I moisturise. I'm 50 years old. I've never known the alarm bells to ring this loud from all corners. That's why I mentioned the football the other week. Not because it's emblematic or particularly definitive, but because it's an illustration of how many different corners are hearing the alarm bells. Corners that may perhaps have been traditionally expected to hear them last. Well, they're hearing them now. But the government isn't. And nor are the people who continue to prop it up. And I don't know why. How can it be? How can these alarm bells be ringing so loudly while so much of the country continues to insist that it's just the jingle from a local ice cream van?